Welcome back. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on Newsx. The stage is set for one of the most important meetings of the 21st century. 1,267 days after Russia went to war with Ukraine, a United States president will be meeting with the Russian president with the hope of ending the war. The meeting is scheduled in Anchorage in Alaska at 1 a.m. India time on Friday. Before the meeting, the US president has warned Russian President Putin of severe consequences if Putin continues the Ukraine war after the summit. Putin, on the other hand, has acknowledged Trump's efforts as being genuine. Zelensky has warned Trump before the meeting that Putin definitely does not want peace. India has welcomed the summit, reiterating its stance that this is not an era of war. Trump's Treasury Secretary has also warned India of secondary tariffs over Russian oil if the summit fails. The stakes are high as the two leaders will be face to face. Whether peace is in sight is the only question that the world wants answers for. Joining us live at this point is Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Professor Latham, welcome. Thank you for being with us today on Newsx. How do you react to this meeting that has finally been fixed for the 15th of August in Alaska? What are the anticipations there in the U.S. for this meeting?
Well, I think some people have exaggerated expectations because there are some irreconcilable differences at play on this particular playing field, and it's going to be hard for Presidents Putin and Trump to overcome those irreconcilable differences. The areas where they agree are that both Russia and the U.S. want a deal with each other. They want to enhance their relations. Russia wants out from under the sanctions. The United States wants to court Russia and draw it away from China in many respects. And so there's some prospect for progress there, I suppose. But Ukraine, the war in Ukraine is the sticking point. Trump has invested too much political capital in bringing that to an end. He needs to see that war end, and I don't think he cares on what terms. President Putin wants to see the war end, but on his terms, and his terms involve perpetual occupation and incorporation of the Donbass region into the Russian Federation. Here's the fly in the ointment, as it were. That deal could be done probably between those two great powers, but the European allies are backing Ukraine's demand for a seat at the table. No deal, says President Zelensky, unless Ukraine is part of the negotiation that yields that deal. And there's a prospect for a follow-on summit in which that might happen. But at this particular summit, Trump is only paying attention to Zelensky because Prime Minister Starmer and Chancellor Merz and other important European players are putting a lot of pressure on him, which is further complicating these negotiations in Alaska. So, bottom line is, I'm not terribly hopeful. Although I think the theatrics might be interesting.
Absolutely. Let me, in fact, quickly take that across to Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee, former diplomat as well. Ambassador Mukherjee, as far as, of course, this meeting is concerned, a lot is riding, of course, on this meeting between Trump and Putin. They have spoken, a few times since Donald Trump has become president of the United States again, but meeting face to face, on U.S. soil. What are your expectations?
Well, first of all, Uday, I would like to clarify that why should the Trump's Treasury Secretary threaten India with more sanctions if this meeting does not take place as expected? Why doesn't he threaten China with more sanctions? He is threatening India because he thinks that India is weaker than China. That is completely unacceptable to a sovereign country. That's the first point I want to make. Secondly, there is a long history of the then USSR, now Russian Federation, and United States carving up the world as they wish to. It happened in Yalta, for example. It's not the first time that such thing would have happened. In this particular case, again, history has proven that history is never kind to defeated powers. And unfortunately, President Zelensky has lost the war. Under those circumstances, a deal could be possible if both sides agree to freeze where they are, which means Russia too would have to give up a small percentage of its territory to Ukraine, and that would be difficult for President Putin to accept, but he could be pressured to accept it. After that comes what? It was Henry Kissinger who famously said that no peace agreement should be fully satisfactory to both sides or so dissatisfactory that one side wants to break the deal. That is the way he explained the difference between Congress of Vienna and Treaty of Versailles in 1919. I think that an unsatisfactory peace deal, which both sides can accept, that is to say, Putin and Zelensky, which would be for which President Trump would take the credit, and for which President Putin would nominate President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, would actually be the tipping point in this case. All that President Putin has to do is to say, I accept a stalemate, like the way it was in Korea, and in return, Russia will nominate President Putin for the Nobel Peace Prize. That will come as a huge relief to India, because I don't understand how we have been dragged in for purchase of Russian oil while the Chinese have got 90 days. That shows actually, Uday, to sobering thought that the American president thinks we are a weak power, and so he deals with us like a bully, while he is very careful with China because it's a stronger power. We should remember that domestically and make ourselves a much stronger power, so that bullies don't try and come and bully India. That is not acceptable to India, but clearly President Putin doesn't know Indian history. Under those circumstances, I am reasonably confident that there will be a breakthrough. It may not be satisfactory to Zelensky. It may not be satisfactory to the EU, but let's not forget, the EU and Japan have already caved in to President Trump's tariff threats. The EU today is not in a situation where they can put any pressure on the United States, and therefore ultimately they will cave in, just the way they did at Yalta. So I would say that if Putin plays his cards right, he's got a deal, President Trump has got a deal, and President Trump gets the Nobel Peace Prize, and all of us in India can breathe in peace. Uday.
Yes, Major General Shashi Asthana, former DG Infantry, also is with us live now on the broadcast. Major General Asthana, this much-awaited meeting between Putin and Trump, of course, scheduled for the 15th of August in Alaska. It certainly is a big day in India, as 15th of August is Independence Day, but it's turned out to be a big day for the US and Russia too. What are your expectations for this meeting?
I don't visualize very much of expectations for the simple reason, because the positions before the meeting are wide apart. We see that Russia is on a stronger wicket. They have an edge as far as this meeting is concerned from all angles. Firstly, the entire NATO wanted Putin to be a pariah, but it has not happened. The fact that he is now sitting with President Trump and has been attending so many meetings all over the world, and so many leaders have visited him, indicates that that has not happened. His isolation has not happened. He physically holds 20% of Ukraine is a stated fact. And it is also a stated fact that whatever one may do, the NATO cannot get that territory back. That is also quite clear, at least by war. So that is one part of it. The second issue is, as far as Putin is concerned, with these conditions, his point of view is that his security concerns must be looked into, and his security concerns haven't changed right from the beginning of the war till date. So I don't think he is going to budge on those security concerns by any stretch of imagination. Now coming on to USA. USA certainly wants to have good relations with Russia for many reasons. They also don't want to get sucked into this war because their Indo-Pacific strategy is faltering. Because too much into this means that they have given China a free hand, and thereafter they are no match to China as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned. That's a writing on the wall. So they have to now decide whether they are into this war or they can somehow give some kind of big power contestation to China elsewhere. That's a major decision which they have to take. Now, rhetorics apart, President Trump may say that, okay, Russia will have to face consequences. Russia has also tested a fair amount of nuclear weapons, and they are also said that, okay, we will deploy nuclear weapons as we want because there is no treaty now. So there is some pre-summit posturing, which I think both sides are doing. I don't think that that carries much weight. As far as Europe and Ukraine are concerned, I don't think they carry much weight. I agree with the ambassador for a simple reason, because they do not have the kind of strategic autonomy which they had earlier. The fact that they have given zero tariff to America and caved in shows that what kind of position they have as far as the US is concerned. Also, the problem with the European countries and Ukraine both are that they know that they cannot handle Russia minus USA. That's a statement of fact. And that is the reason why they are giving in to everything. The only thing why they got together and they gave a call to President Trump because they fear that Yalta 2 may not happen or should not happen. And therefore, somehow they have tried to sensitize President Trump. Then don't agree to something which we will not be able to get out of it. So that's perhaps one of the things which have happened. So I think what President Trump has tried to also bring down the expectations by saying that it is a listening session, and then he has also said that it is a test run, and then he has said that I will have a second meeting, and in the second meeting Zelensky may be there. I don't think President Putin is ever going to meet Zelensky unless elected. His stance is let him get elected again, then I will meet him. Minus elections, I am not going to meet him. He is not the leader. That is his stance. So I don't think he is going to change that stance also. So maximum cards are with Putin in this meeting. President Trump can do many things in a manner that he can get out of it. He can sulk, he can threaten, all those things can happen. He can put more sanctions, but I think on ground situations will not change with any of these actions. The only thing is that if people concede that Russia has taken territory which cannot be brought back, which is a fact, and thereafter start putting substance into the meeting, then it will make some sense. Otherwise, if a stance is that not an inch of territory to be ceded, then it's a no-go. Back to you.
All right. Let me, in fact, go back to Andrew Latham. Andrew Latham, you know, as far as, of course, now the rhetoric that has come in before this meeting from the United States, be it Donald Trump or be it, of course, the White House spokesperson's Caroline Leavitt, or be it Kremlin's statements as well. Do you see any sort of big outcome of this meeting? Or do you believe it could set the ball rolling for further meetings between the two leaders at all?
Well, honestly, I don't think there'll be much. There'll be a lot of theatrics and optics, but there won't be much substantive agreement. Trump has already, it needs to be noted, changed his tune in the last few days. He's been much more, he's signaling much more clearly that Zelensky needs to be at some table at some point in some future. He wasn't speaking like that a week or 2 weeks ago when this was first raised as a possibility, this summit. Again, the US and Russia are highly motivated to come to a deal over the heads of the Ukrainians. Yalta, I'm not sure if the historical analogy is exactly right, but I think it is illuminating that great powers will do what great powers will do, and they will often not take into account what lesser powers, what their interests are. But I think domestic politics in the US is such that Trump simply cannot do a Yalta 2.0. He has to be sensitive to the fact that there are big and powerful constituencies in the US that are very pro-Ukrainian and that don't want to see Zelensky thrown under the proverbial bus. So he has changed his tune, whether that's, again, just theatrics or whether he's really changed his mind. I think it's the former, not the latter. I think both parties, Russia and the US, have some vested interest in coming away with a joint communique which sounds good and looks good, and maybe as a promissory note about some future process that will unfold that will include Zelensky. But here's the bottom line. At the end of the day, the Russian constitution claims the Donbass is part of the Russian Federation, and the Ukrainian constitution claims that the Donbass is part of Ukraine. And there's no middle ground there at all, except the facts on the ground that the military on both sides are delivering. And it's worth pointing out parenthetically that Russia has made, by this board's standards, some substantial gains in the last few days, which again is likely to strengthen their hand at the negotiating table. So bottom line, I think I agree with my two colleagues. The more I think about it, Yalta 2.0 does strike me as plausible. But as Mark Twain once put it, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And we're likely to see this, a rhyme of Yalta and not a repeat of Yalta.
Yes, let me in fact quickly now get in a quick closing comment from you, Ambassador Bhashwati Mukherjee, on this meeting's direct fallout on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What do you believe could be the ramifications of this meeting on that conflict, and also given the fact that Ukrainian head of state Zelensky is also viewing this meeting very closely?
I'd like to first make two quick comments. First is, Hegel had said, if you don't know your history, history will repeat itself. Secondly, defeated powers never get their territory back. As we know to our cost, we've never yet got back Akshay Chin from China. When you have lost territory in war, you don't get it back. Look at the Korean partition. So President Zelensky will have to do an about turn to understand that the land which Russia has captured, which has been traditionally Russian and has been captured with Russian blood, sweat and tears, is never going to be given back by Putin. Whether he likes it or he doesn't like it, whether he's thrown under a bus, he's finished his term in any case. He's not faced an election because of the excuse of what has happened. I'm afraid this is Zelensky's curtain call. He has to give it up. Secondly, as far as the Yalta 2.0 is concerned, yes, it will happen because both sides want it. Last time, there was an interloper at the table, that was Churchill, who had no business to be there. The real two players were USSR and US. And this time, there is no Churchill there, there is no Zelensky there, there is no defeated power there. There are these two powerful men, and they will do Yalta 2.0. And ultimately, the European Union, who caved in, unlike India, to tariffs, the European Union security is totally dependent on NATO and United States. They will accept it, and so will Zelensky, who will be thrown under the bus. Those are my closing comments today. That is what is going to happen.
All right, Ambassador Mukherjee, yes, Ambassador Mukherjee, point taken. Major Lasthana, last word to you.
European Union wants the war to continue for the reason because they haven't prepared to face Russia, and they think that if Ukrainians can die and make Russia weaker, it suits them. So paying some money and making Russia weak suits them, and that is why they are trying very hard. Zelensky doesn't give in to a ceasefire, because Zelensky a little earlier was inclined for a ceasefire, but presently his tone has also changed after Europeans gave him a little bit of thumbs up in a manner that don't cede territory. So the question is, reality is that he has to cede territory. Without ceding territory, ceasefire cannot happen is a reality. Whatever President Trump may try, whatever anybody may try. The question, zero ceding territory does not mean ceasefire, and therefore some compromise has to be there. And unless that compromise is reached, or they have to agree first, that there could be a possibility of a compromise, then only this deal can go through. Otherwise, it will be optics, it will be good show. A joint statement can say that we try to understand each other and we understand each other's positions very well, or something like that. Somebody will very nicely and intelligently draft the joint statement. But notwithstanding that, I don't think nothing very much will change on ground. Uday.
All right. In fact, we're getting more breaking news now coming in. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion.